Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Triathlete Podcast, the show where we capture the personal fitness journeys of people across the world. Today's guest I have is Stephen Chowning. He's one of the pillars of the Seattle Green Lake Triathlon Group and somebody who's mentored me in my triathlon journey. Stephen, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for giving us your time. Would you like to start by introducing yourself?
As you said, my name is Steve Chowning. I've been doing triathlons for going on 10 years now.
Wow. So what was your introduction to fitness? Was it something you did as a child or something you picked up as an adult?
So I wasn't particularly fit as a child. I didn't do sports. I mean, I was active, so to speak, but nothing, particular to fitness. I used to ride a bike when I was in a kid in high school and whatnot, but I never did professional sports. It was about when I was in my late 40s that I started to notice that Father Time was catching up with me, and I was having, a lot of trouble just getting out of breath, walking upstairs or whatnot. And I decided that I needed to make some changes, some healthy changes.
Interesting. So pretty much after school through adulthood till your 40s, you didn't really pursue fitness as a thing in your life. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I didn't. I was pretty sedentary, especially later on. Worked at a computer and sat around and didn't do anything necessarily, even on weekends, that was particularly, physically challenging.
Interesting. So what is the trigger to really get into it in the way you do now?
So, well, I mean, a couple things. A friend of ours got us into walking and running, just in general, and that was fairly hard. We would start out just walking like 45 minutes 3 times a week, and I was, as I said, in pretty bad shape. I would by the third day of the week, we would do Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And by Fridays, my shin were cramping just from walking, 45 minutes to an hour a day. And we did some running. I remember going to the Green Lake track just south of the lake and trying to run at any pace a quarter mile, one lap. And I was in such bad shape that I was unable to even jog at the slowest pace for one whole lap. I had to run, walk, just to make one lap. And then a year or so, maybe after that, a very good friend of ours said to us, "I want you to do something with me, but you have to say yes before I tell you what it is." And so we semi-reluctantly said yes, and turns out he wanted to do a triathlon. And so, knowing absolutely nothing about triathlons, the three of us did some swimming, some biking, and some running, and got a little bit of practice in, and went and did our first triathlon. So those are kind of the things that got me more into fitness, as an older adult.
Very interesting. So what age were you when you signed up for your first triathlon?
Well, that was 2010. So that was 24 years ago. So
14 years ago. Yeah.
14 years ago.
Yeah.
So I would have been 46.
Wow. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
blind promises to friends is a great way to get started. I think, for anybody who's a triathlete out there, you want to invite your friends, just make them promise you blind, and you'll get them to go.
It worked for us.
Yeah. Nice. Like what distance did you sign up for? How did you train for it?
So, like I said, we didn't know anything. Over the years, I've gained a considerable amount of knowledge about the sport of triathlon, but back then the group didn't exist. It was just the three of us, going out into Lake Washington and floundering around. And then we would go and bike the Burke Gilman and we thought it was a good idea to practice running off the bike, and it was a good idea, but the first few times we did it, our legs felt like we were drunk. And so it was just us kind of doing the different sports with no particular plan, or just, trying to get some distance in. And back then, I mean, a 10 or 15-mile bike ride was a lot for us. I remember, we don't know anything. And I remember bonking hard once on a bike ride where I was just suffering for the last, 4 or 5 miles, having no energy because I didn't know to do nutrition during the ride.
Interesting. Man, when you talk about days when you couldn't walk a mile or couldn't do a mile of running or struggling with a 15-mile bike ride, kind of breaks my mental image of you a little bit, because ever since I've known you, you've been at like peak fitness, or one of the most fit people in our group. So it's interesting. Do you feel like a different person now?
It's been a long journey, yeah. And it's something that as a new person getting into the sport, you have to keep in mind that it doesn't just happen overnight. You can't take 3 months and train for a half Ironman race. It's at least 6 months. And the fitness that I've got now, I've built over years of training, and I'm happy. I like, what motivates me to keep going is to be fit, right? I'm not super competitive. I'm more of a just I enjoy feeling better and being able to go out and do an hour 10K run like I did today.
Oh, fantastic. So yeah, coming back to the first triathlon that you did, any particular funny memories or memorable things that you remember from it?
So there's a couple. We were all pretty slow in comparison, Connie especially. This was 2010, and it was our first triathlon. It was also the Lake Meridian. It was the Lake Meridian race, and it was their first event they'd put on. And they had brought in the Biggest Loser winners to guarantee that nobody who entered the race would finish last. The winners of the Biggest Loser competition promised, anybody who signed up that they would make sure they were the last ones, not you, which was a good thing. But we were swimming, and they had a race together rather than, solo. And the three of us, me and Connie and a friend of ours, entered that division, and we were all swimming together, and Connie was going quite slow, and the guy who was behind us was like, and since we were kind of waiting for Connie, a friend of ours, Nick, who was the one who got us into it, was singing as he was swimming, and the person behind us said, if you have the energy to sing, then you should be swimming faster. And we're like, oh no, we're not leaving Connie. We're in this together.
Oh man.
And then the other thing was, as I said, we didn't know anything about triathlon, and but we knew, like, by that point we knew we should have a gel or something rather than just water. And I hit on the idea of putting my gel in my water, and our friend Nick, I told him I was going to do that, and he decided to do the same thing, except for he had Gatorade in his instead of just straight water. So he ended up like double sugaring his water. And during the ride, I kept telling him, drink. And so by the time he got to the run, he had like sugar crystals around his mouth because he was over fueling.
Oh my God. He's
But
probably the only guy who increased his blood sugar level after a
yeah,
triathlon.
exactly. But we got through the bike, the swim, we did the run, and we all finished, at the finish line together. And that was a great memory.
Wow, fantastic. So it's been a consistent journey since then, I guess. That was your first taste?
So yeah, Connie was instantly fell in love with triathlon. That was in August or September that they did the race, and the 30 minutes after we're done, Connie was like, "Ooh, when's the next race?" And she looked on the calendar, was very disappointed that that was the last race of the season. So we had to wait till next race season. And Connie has been a steadfast competitor ever since. I'm not as competitive as she might be. Um, and so I like doing it as much for the fitness and the camaraderie rather than the competition, although I have gotten better over the years.
Yeah, that brings me to a sort of an interesting aspect of this, which is Connie, for people who may not know, is Steven's partner, and both of them are, from my perspective, triathlon experts. They're both mentors in the Green Lake Triathlon group and have helped me personally. So, yeah, is it a competitive household? Are you all trying to best each other in training or in competition?
Not necessarily. I would say we try to encourage each other more than compete.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, a little friendly competition maybe, but
Yeah, got it.
not not as hardcore as some other uh, tri couples we know.
Nice. And both of you all have been super active in the triathlon group. So, what's the journey of the community and building the Green Lake Triathlon group?
So Connie got in on the ground floor. She the group formed in 2014 as an offshoot of the Seattle Green Lake Running Group. There was a core of maybe 20-ish people who all knew each other and ran together and decided to do triathlons. And I kind of, at that point, I had done triathlons a couple years, 2 or 3 years, and I wasn't training a lot and wasn't getting better. And so I kept the training up, but I wasn't, racing every year like she was, because, you know, I didn't want to pay, the entry fee and get up at 3 in the morning to go do the same time I did the year before. As long as I was motivating to train, which I was happy with that. But she was in with the group from the early on stages and they started doing training events, and she was hosting swims in Green Lake. And then I started joining her at hosting events and also some of the socials, and got to meet the people in the group. And as you probably have found out, they're some of the most friendly, encouraging, inclusive people that you'll get to know. And it's hard not to fall in love with being around people like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, totally relate. Well, the community is one of the reasons why I was able to get into the sport. And anybody out there who might feel like they're practicing alone, I mean, try to find a tribe of people who are doing it. It's a lot of fun, and it's a lot of friendly sort of camaraderie and sometimes competition, but it's more fun to just see each of us sort of improving in our own disciplines as we go on. So, cool. So thanks for sharing that. And let's come back to maybe your own training journey, right? So you got into it kind of blind. How did you focus on training from there to the point where you are right now?
So yeah, I'm a little different than a lot of people. A lot of people get into it and they'll buy the books, they'll hire coaches, they'll do the online training plans. And me personally, I found those too rigid. You know, if you look at some of the training plans, they're fairly complex. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they have plans, and you have to do, especially in the swimming and stuff. I didn't want to think about it that much. I mean, I want to go out, I want to get exercise in, and I want to improve, but I didn't want to follow those rigid plans. I've talked to people who have gotten burnt out from doing too much training, and so for me, I don't do as much training as might be good for me if I wanted to do really well. But since I'm not super competitive, I try to fit as much training into my life without it becoming burdensome, but still maintaining enough to either maintain or improve my fitness over time.
Interesting. And of the three disciplines, do you have a preferred one?
So I've always been good at swimming and enjoyed swimming. I'm comfortable in the water, unlike a lot of people who are not. So I like swimming, but my true love, I guess, would be biking.
Yeah, biking. I mean, Steven's somewhat of an expert in the biking area. If you ever need to know how to set up a bike or pick up, buy a bike, he's the guy to go to. Help me pick up my bike as well. And you've also gotten into mountain biking. I think you mentioned earlier. Yeah.
So yeah, not too long after we started doing triathlons, a friend of mine is a really hardcore mountain biker and got me into the sport. And I went riding with him once or twice, maybe. At that time, me and Connie had a couple of cross country mountain bikes, which weren't particularly suited to the type of mountain biking that my friend was doing, which is more all mountain or downhill. And so after a couple rides, I was hooked and bought a better bike, and finally ended up with my dream bike, and just fell in love with the sport. And it also made me a better road biker. It's the
Interesting.
skills you get on a mountain bike. Absolutely, it helped me on the road.
Got it. Now, one of the questions that a beginner triathlete faces is what bike to buy and how to pick one. So, what advice do you have for people in that position?
Yeah, I mean, you can spend a lot of money in the sport of triathlon. Um, with the exception of a wetsuit, which I say, definitely spend as much as you can afford if you're serious about it. If you just want to try the sport out, a cheap suit is okay. But if you decide you really like it, a good quality suit doesn't have to be super top end, um, but maybe second tier is definitely worth the money. When we're talking about bikes, um, I'm kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum. A lot of people want a triathlon bike, and they're fine. The biggest downside to a triathlon bike is they're very specific to the sport. In other words, they don't make really great road bikes. And you have to, if you're going to buy and use a tri bike, you have to spend a lot of time training on the bike to get the benefits that are there. So, usually for beginners, I tend to point them um, at the lower end of the spectrum, even used, if you can handle buying a used bike. And by that, I mean, generally beginner bikers don't know what to look for in a good used bike or a bad used bike, which is where I kind of tend to come in, like I did with you, and help you find a bike that's worth having and get it for a decent price and make sure it doesn't have too many problems in your purchase. It's always safer to buy a new bike, but a decent new bike is fairly expensive. They're typically start out around $900 nowadays. So if you're looking to really stretch your triathlon dollar, then a used bike is a better way to go. But you do have to watch out for the pitfalls.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned sort of the $900 price point because, when I first started, I was looking for a bike and I just, as most people probably would do, I went onto Amazon and I found like $200 bikes there. So, what's your take on those?
So there's kind of a price point where below which you're really losing value. The name brand bike manufacturers, Trek, Specialized, Cannondale, Giant, they have kind of a minimum standard that they're willing to put their name on as far as the quality. And they're not great bikes per se, but they're decent. For that $900, you're getting kind of the lowest rate of component that is worth having. A $200 bike off of Amazon or, Walmart or Dick's Sporting is gonna probably not last very long. It's not unusual for those kinds of bikes ridden regularly to last one summer. So you're losing value for your money because at the end of the summer, you either have to buy another $200 bike or pay the money for a better bike. The other really big downside for me is that there actually can be fairly dangerous. The quality of the components is very poor. Typically, if you're buying it from a big box store or something where some guy who doesn't know anything about bikes is putting it together, he could put it together wrong. So you're riding down a hill, especially in Seattle, maybe the brakes give out. And instead of stopping, you end up in the middle of a busy intersection, and that's not
Ouch.
a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope that never happens to anybody. I'll need to double check my $200 bike now, but yeah.
So yeah, I mean, at a certain point level, people who are very familiar with bikes call those $200 bikes a bike-shaped object. So it's
Oh, wow.
technically not a bike per se. It just looks like a bike.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. Cool. So let's move to the swimming aspect of the triathlon. You've mentored a bunch of new swimmers, including myself. What things do you think people should keep in mind when they start swimming?
So we've been doing, Connie and I have been hosting open water swims for a while, since say 2014, 15. So 10 years now. And it's pretty regular that we get at least one swimmer a season, if not more, who comes out to open water who is in over their head, so to speak. You can go swim
Guilty as charged.
You can go swim in the pool and be actually pretty good at it. There's even been some say collegiate level, competitive swimmers who just have never been in the open water. And as you know, being in the open water is a completely different animal than being in the pool. There's, it's not uncommon for us to get somebody, out there who goes out for a swim and thinks they'll be okay. But they've never actually been out in the open water. And so they get out there and the anxiety takes over and they can start to have problems. And unlike running and getting an injury or biking and going too far and not being able to finish, having problems out in the water is potentially more dangerous.
Yeah, I can really relate to that because, I actually tried to go open water swimming in 2009 when I was on a trip with some of my friends in Vietnam and had a near drowning experience and pretty much stayed away from the open water since then until I got into open water swimming for the triathlon last year. I really didn't know how to swim. I stopped 3 times trying to do a length of the pool, but I just kind of needed to do something to get into open water and train for the triathlon, which is why I started joining the community swims.
Yeah.
And it was, I could feel the physical memory of, many years ago, like 14 years ago, basically coming back to me. So I can totally relate to that fear. You actually have people who may have underestimated the difficulty and have come out to swim with you.
Yeah, I have had people that come out and get out and, I generally try to weed them out and keep an eye on them, especially their first time with us as a group, and encourage them to let me buddy swim with them, which I'm fine with doing. I will caution other people against doing that because a panicked person in the water can be dangerous to both themselves and to you, and so you really have to be knowledgeable and comfortable to buddy swim with somebody who might be having a problem. But yeah, I've had people. One guy in particular got halfway to the first buoy in Green Lake and apparently got so anxiety stricken that he basically stopped swimming and started going under.
That
Yeah,
sounds scary. Yeah, I think
it
I remember.
is.
It's probably scarier for the host than it is for the participant at some point. Um, I remember one of the lines you told me when you were being my buddy in one of the swims was, "If I promise not to pull you down, you won't pull me down." And
Yeah, well,
so, yeah,
that's the deal, right? You
yeah,
don't try to drown me, and I won't try to drown you.
yeah. So I did stick to that. That was good advice.
Well,
Um,
I try to, it's a lot of it is just being comfortable and knowing that something bad isn't going to happen. And if you're in
yeah,
a still body of water, not, rapids or currents or whatever, as long as you kind of remain calm and don't try to get out of the water, you can float pretty readily in the water. And if you
yeah.
need to, if you get tired or anxious, you can just float and relax and calm down and catch your breath and then move on.
Yep. Cool. So you mentioned earlier in the interview that you're not very competitive, but Lake Stevens Try, the one which I did, you finished up on the podium. So how does a guy who's not that competitive end up on the podium of a triathlon?
So I enjoy being fit, right?
Okay.
I enjoy being able to, of the three disciplines, running was always my least favorite. And the main reason was because I wasn't very good at it. A few years ago, Connie and I did a training block for running because she wanted to do a 15K at 10-minute miles. And so we did a training block 3 months, which is normal if you want to make a gain in anything, swimming, biking, running. It takes 3 months. It doesn't just happen overnight. And we did a dedicated training block of running where we were running 4 or 5 times a week, and it got harder every week, and it sucked. I really didn't enjoy the training for the first 2.5 months because I didn't get a rest, right? It was turning it up every week. And then 2.5 months in, right when that 3 month block of improving starts to happen, I was like, hey, you know what? The hills aren't so bad and the long runs don't hurt as much. And I'm actually not hating this. And so I've actually liked running. But to answer your question more specifically, over time, despite my lack of diligence in training, I have gotten better. And in 2019, I did a sprint triathlon at Black Diamond. And I went as hard as I could in the swim, had a pretty good swim, went really hard on the bike, had a decent bike, and got onto the run. And for those of you who haven't been to a competitive triathlon event, they will write your age on your calf. And so as you're biking or running, you can look at your competitors and tell if somebody in your age group is trying to pass you. And I got about, I don't know, quarter mile from the finish of my run. And I was already going basically as hard as I could. And I saw a guy in my age group go past me. And I was like, I didn't know at that point if I was first or last, but you don't let somebody pass you if you're trying to be competitive. And I tried to hang with him and I couldn't quite do it. He just slowly inched away from me. I kind of could feel my heart rate hitting a limit. And as it turns out, he took the last podium place in my age group by 30 seconds. So
Oh man.
that was kind of like turned up the screw for that competitiveness, right? You're like, oh man, I was that close. So since then, 2019, I've kind of had it in the back of my mind that I've wanted to podium my age group, right? When we got back in the day, when we first were doing triathlons, I was maybe a bottom 25%er, right? And I was like, well, I would like to be mid-pack, right? I'd be happy with mid-pack. And so now, after 10 years of doing this, I'm almost on the podium, right?
Fantastic.
And so the last couple of years, that's been a little bug of mine. I want to be able to be on the podium for my age group. And so that was 2019 when I almost missed it. 2020 obviously was a complete bust for all of us.
Sure, yeah.
2021, 2022, we started getting back into it. Me and Connie personally had some personal things going on. My dad passed away, and so we were dealing with all of that, and that kind of kept me from being able to train. 2023, I just, we kind of got through all of that, and I tried to do more training. And so 2023, I decided to sign up for 2 races. Lake Meridian, which was kind of, our the one we did from the beginning, and so that's kind of has a special place in our heart. But and it's a race that we know. Like, I know the course, I've done it, I like it. But the main reason I picked that one, the number one reason, is that they podium down to 5 places. A lot of races only podium to 3rd place. So nice. Like, if I want a podium, I might as well pick one that podiums down to 5. And then I also signed up for Lake Stevens, which was your first.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I picked Lake Stevens is because I wanted a backup in case I had a bad race day. Mm-hmm. And so Lake Meridian rolls around, and I was as locked in as I have ever been on a race. They tried to get me to come do the team picture, and I was like, I gotta concentrate. I'm in my zone. I'm getting ready. No pictures. Leave me alone. And I pushed super hard on the swim, the bike, and I felt like I was dying on the run. But and it's a little bit, the run's a little hilly. And then they posted their race results, their preliminary results, and Connie went over and looked at them, and she's like, "Did you check the results?" And I'm like, "No." And she sent me over there, and I looked, and I got 4th place.
Oh, amazing.
So
smart
I was
choice.
Super happy. Yeah, right. I knew, like, from training times and looking, like, I went to the point of looking at last year's competition where they had finished, like, what, where I needed to be to get in that podium position. And I was like, yeah, I'm close in my training. If I pushed really hard, I could probably make the podium, and I did, right?
Amazing.
And so then I had already achieved my goal. Lake Stevens rolls around, and I was like, you know what? I've already been there. I might as well just go flat out from the gun and see where, what happens, right? I don't care whether I DNF or whatever. So I pushed super hard. The bike is fairly short, and then the run, the swim is extra short. I think it's 400, and the bike was only like 9 miles. I think they're
late 10 miles.
Yeah, it's shorter than a normal sprint. And then the normal 5K run. And I was just had the pedal to the metal. I was going as hard as I could in every discipline. And actually had a pretty good run. I was doing sub-9s on the back half of the run. And
impressive, man.
And ended up 2nd place on the podium for that race.
Congratulations.
So that was memorable to me. It was also memorable to me because that was your first race, and we had trained together, and I was super happy that you were able to complete it. One of the things I really do enjoy about doing triathlons is meeting new people and getting them involved and interested in and love the sport the same way that me and Connie are.
Oh yeah, I mean, one of the things that really stands out about you is, excuse me. I mean, the amount of effort you put into yourself is evident through this conversation, but what's not being heard of is the amount you give back to the community, both you and Connie together. And, even the post that you put out to summarize the Lake Stevens result was so heartwarming, where you talked about everybody who had done really well and participated, and, the bike rides you organized for the community. Everything is just so nice. So thanks for being there, and thanks for helping people like me get into the sport. So I guess one last question. You've seen the journey from, not being very fit as, a young adult to being a podium finisher in your age group in a triathlon. So what advice would you have for other aspirants who might find themselves in a similar position?
So we're creatures of habit. And so if it's something that you have an interest in, just be consistent, right? Don't worry about your results necessarily. Don't worry that how slow you are. Connie hates the word slow. And know that if you come out consistently and do the training, you will achieve your goal. And you will also have people like me and Connie cheering you on. I cheer as hard or harder for the people finishing at the end than I do for the super fast people at the front. That's great. I love that they're able to do that, but I really love the people who get out there and, finish at the back, right? The willingness to be that person to maybe finish last, right? It takes a lot of courage.
Yep. Cool. Yeah, great thoughts. And on that note, I think we can probably end the conversation. Thanks so much for your time, and thanks for everything you do for the community, both you and Connie. And yeah, I'll see you in training sometime.
Sounds good.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
See ya.